and welcome in to the very first episode of Heat of the Moment, a Miami Heat podcast. My name is Micah. I am joined by my good friend Lino. If you are listening to us on what was formerly the Irrational Confidence feed, that is who we are, and you will also probably note we are missing a man. Our good friend Kalen has some exciting things going on in his life that we are very excited about for him, but unfortunately we'll be taking away some time from his availability to do podcasts. So going forward, this feed will be a Miami Heat show hosted again by myself, my friend Lino, but we do expect Kalen to do some guest spots in the future. If for some reason you hadn't listened to Irrational Confidence, welcome in. Lino and I are lifelong friends and lifelong Heat fans, and we want to use this show to basically be your two buddies that watch Heat games that you might have missed or just want to kind of catch up on what's going on with the team. We'll do some recaps of different games. We'll also preview upcoming games throughout the week and just give you all the kind of Heat content you may want. Of course, we'll be discussing news and transactions and things of that nature. And as you could probably guess, this episode will heavily feature discussions of what is going on with Jimmy Butler. Lino, before we get into the Jimmy Butler stuff, is there anything specific you want to cover kind of about your intentions for the show or anything you'd like the people to know about you as a Heat fanalist?
Yeah, I think I'm mostly just excited for us to bring, maybe some fresh perspective to the fan base as well as maybe a little bit more enthusiasm for the team itself and hopefully a better balanced approach to just how we look at the team and how we look at the league. I am a big fan of this team and a great fan of the league in general, but it'll be nice to be really hone in each week on opponents that we've got coming up, opponents we've played recently, and overall, I think we're going to have a good time. So looking forward to that. What is not a good time is the things we have to talk about today.
That's right. We do expect this show to focus a lot on fun X's and O's discussions, discussions about the rotations, who's playing well recently, who needs to play more. But today will be a almost completely off the court show because we will be focusing on what has turned into a really uncomfortable saga between the Jimmy Butler camp and the Miami Heat. So to start off, we'll kind of just do a quick recap in case you guys are kind of unaware, which would probably just be our family members tuning in. So thank you for checking us out. But so this all starts really back in the summer. Jimmy Butler and his agent wanted a 2-year max extension from the Miami Heat. He would essentially get rid of his option year and replace it with a $52 million first year and I believe a $58 million second year. That would cover him for the 2026 and 2027 season where he would be 36 and 37. So he's getting up there. He ended last season injured. He's been missing games. So the Heat were not comfortable giving him that extension. And as far as what was reported, it was a pretty amicable understanding that they came to. We're going to play out this last season with you here. You have an option year. We expect you to opt out of it. We'll reconvene in the summer and figure out how to go from there. I think that was the original game plan, and we're not totally clear, but that has broken down over time. The relationship between Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat front office is extremely fractured now. We saw around a month ago some reports from Shams Charania of ESPN saying the Heat were listening to offers from Jimmy. Jimmy had preferred destinations, according to his agent, Bernie Lee. Then we had Bernie Lee counter that by tweeting at Shams and being like, this isn't true, delete this, whatever. And so we're like, oh, okay, cool. Then Shams continues to report things on Christmas Day, ruining Lino and I's Christmas. Then Pat Riley comes out on the 26th, the day after Christmas, with an official statement, which if you're a Heat fan, you probably are listening to this. Pat Riley almost never speaks to the media. And he put out a statement saying they're not trading Jimmy Butler. Some time goes on. Jimmy gets sick, misses 5 games. He comes back this past Wednesday to play against New Orleans. He looks not very engaged, but he had missed a lot of time. He had been sick. Maybe it's a fluke. They have a back-to-back. They play Indiana. It's more of the same. The entire team looks very lethargic. And then, of course, that brings us to the post-game press conference where Jimmy essentially asks for a trade out of Miami. He says he wants to find his joy back. He doesn't think he'll be able to find it in Miami. He has issues with his role now, what's being asked of him. He wants to play differently than is being asked of him. That whole situation blows up. And then today, which is January 3rd, we get a report late this evening saying that the Miami Heat have suspended Jimmy Butler for 7 games. And the exact quote it ended with was, "Through his actions and statements, he has shown he no longer wants to be a part of this team. Jimmy Butler and his representatives have indicated that they wish to be traded. Therefore, we will listen to offers." So essentially, we have about until January 15th, if we're going off how long he was suspended, for the Miami to find a trade partner for this. So, Lino, that's how we got here. I think just to start, kind of what are your general feelings about where we are now and how this has unfolded?
I think as a fan, this has just been a very challenging season. Beyond the service level stuff of obviously we've had our struggles of trying to be better than a 500 team. We've had some positive things to look at and some great performances from players like Tyler and the development of Khalil Ware. And we've had some disappointing things from, Jovic had a bit of a rough start. Bam is still kind of trying to figure it out. And those are things that are really easy to kind of stomach while you're having a basketball season. All of that stuff is very difficult to take in and understand and feel good about when you're a superstar player. It's kind of like a ticking time bomb. We knew from really day one of the season, really the end of last season when we knew that he was not getting that extension. I think everybody deep in their hearts knew that this was the ultimate outcome of that. I think it's very rare for a player to just be fine missing out on, $55 million dollars or something like that. And so it was kind of a matter of when, which is just kind of like living for a month knowing someone's eventually going to come up and punch you in the face. You just are stressed the whole time. So I have been miserable all season, just waiting for this needle to drop. And we are finally here. And honestly, there's a bit of relief in that. That is like, okay, this is coming to a head. There's no more pretending. There's no more he said, she said. With all the stuff online with Shams and the agent and Pat coming out and saying stuff, I was like, turns out everybody's just lying. And this is exactly what we thought it was. So I will be feeling much better about all of this when it's over. But right now, it's really tough because Jimmy has been incredible for us. He has been a great player and has dragged some really, really challenging teams very, very far into the playoffs. And, I'll always be thankful for that. But it's hard to look at that fondly given all the way that this has, gone down so far. So
Yeah.
I will be happy to kind of move on from all this now that it is clearly over. But, how are you doing, buddy? How's the old heart over there?
Yeah, it's been rough. It's funny. I've been talking to my wife about it a lot. It's crazy because I have no actual connection to any of these people. I don't know any of them personally, but it has deeply negatively impacted me, especially over the last like 24 hours since that press conference and that big loss to Indiana. What I would tell other Heat fans like myself is this right now is probably as bad as it will feel. I hope. I mean, I guess he could get traded to Boston or something, but most likely this will be as bad as it feels. And soon, he'll be playing for another team, and we can kind of reflect on all the great things he's done for the organization, all the awesome performances he's had. But right now, it is hard not to focus on what has just become a really ugly divorce. Jimmy, whether you blame the Pat Riley side of it or the Jimmy side of it, I don't think either side has handled themselves perfectly in this, and I feel to a degree Jimmy's kind of been pushed to this. I think with what we know now, you could look at those Shams reports in mid-December and think, okay, maybe the Heat could have just traded him then, and we could have avoided all this. Prior to last night, it had really felt like this was an issue between Jimmy and Pat. I should have noted that, even before the contract negotiations, there's the press conference at the end of last season where Pat called out Jimmy, now kind of infamously saying he needed to shut up if he wasn't out there playing against the Celtics and he needed to be more available, things like that. And it's just tough because this whole situation is kind of falling apart, and I think it's just kind of putting a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and it's choosing people to take sides. And I think when things like this happen, it's really only anger or sadness is how you can respond as a fan, and then that's really tough. And not to mention, it's hard on the actual team itself. Bam and Tyler, all these guys are having to answer questions about it. So, Lino, projecting forward a little bit, just with the Jimmy side of it, what do you expect to happen from here? What do you think happens
Oh,
next?
he's gonna be home, chilling, hanging out. I think they asked him to spend the rest of the season home. There's no way you let a guy like that back in the locker room, but there's also no way. There's no way they don't trade him. I think within the next few weeks, maybe they try to wait to the deadline to see what happens. But ultimately, from Jimmy's perspective, he's probably just going to be at the crib. I don't know that he's going to go so far as to take it out on his teammates on the floor. Like taking possessions off on offense honestly isn't too far from his MO. He wasn't exactly a high usage guy during the regular season in previous years. So the hubbub about him standing in the corner, I'd love for him to be more involved. He's a great player and is great when he is involved, but he did always emphasize trying to get other people going throughout the game and then taking over when he needed to. And he just never really had that opportunity last night. And then against New Orleans, we were killing them. So he really wasn't needed. And so it's a really strange combination of games for all this to be happening. But I don't see him really taking this out on teammates that he, has claimed to really love over the past few seasons, because these are his guys, and hopefully he will, uphold that. But more than likely, he's just at the house chilling until he's on a new team. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the same. I think if I had to put money on it, I say they'll get a deal done within probably 2 weeks. I think that's just better for everyone. It is worth noting, and I'm sure a lot of Heat fans listening know this. I think the Heat's original intention was to go through this entire season with Jimmy, and then basically facilitate him going to his next team in the summer, whether that was he opts in and they trade him, or a sign and trade, just because there wouldn't be a team with max cap space. So the Heat would kind of have to help him out in some way. And that's beneficial for the Heat because if they were able to just get his, $48 million off the books, that unlocks a lot of things they can do. It just gives them a lot of financial flexibility. If you're listening to the show, you probably know, there's these new salary cap aprons that can be very restrictive for what a team's able to do. So if the Heat did just lose Jimmy's contract, if it just went off the books, this is according to Bobby Marks, they would be $47 million below the tax. They would have access to the $14 million non-tax mid-level, $5.1 million biannual exception, and then have $50 million plus in expiring contracts. That's guys like Duncan Robinson, Terry Rozier. So as a Heat fan, your destination. You can kind of convince yourself, you hear the phrase, "Oh, I don't want to let a guy walk for nothing." But in the new CBA, just that salary cap flexibility can be very valuable, especially if you're a destination. So, Lino, what is there I guess a line of demarcation for you as far as what you're getting back in a deal, and what would be, I guess, insufficient for you to not do the deal at all, to maybe, like you were saying, maybe send Jimmy home for the rest of the season because it's more beneficial to just have that money come off the books instead of taking maybe bad salary.
Well, that right there honestly isn't kind of a consolation prize to me. I think that has to be considered as one of the premium outcomes of this scenario, is that we can find a way to keep him on the team and just let him go at the end. I think we were talking about this over the past few weeks. One scenario that comes to mind, and probably comes to mind for the rest of the league, is that the LA Clippers were in this very similar situation with Paul George, in which they decided, we're not going to trade him at the deadline. We're not going to trade him at the previous offseason. We're going to play the season out, and then we're going to see what happens at the end. And ultimately, they didn't pay him. He got a max contract elsewhere. They opened up a ton of cap space, and look at them now. They're having a pretty solid season. They've signed some really strong role players, and they're leaning on their stars. And this is all without Kawhi Leonard, mind you. And so I think that that is happening at the same time that the Sixers are struggling with health and really questioning why they may have overpaid on Paul George. And so, with that in mind, and the whole league witnessing that happening in real time, getting cap space is a real option. Like someone leaving for nothing isn't leaving for nothing. Saving $100 million is awesome in any kind of context, but especially as an organization in the NBA under these new tax aprons. And so that's something that we should really consider as either option two or one. Beyond that, there's not exactly a superstar that I think we bring in and makes all of this better. But guys like De'Aaron Fox, if he becomes available and we can deal for that, that would be great. Would require a lot of work or a lot of malpractice on the Sacramento Kings side, which is not completely out of the realm of expectation, but I just don't see it happening right now. I could be convinced for a guy like Kevin Durant if for some reason the Suns decide that they want to move on, but it would need to be a superstar or it would need to be just draft compensation. We cannot bring in some mid tier role players or mid tier stars that have these extended contracts that we're just carrying money into the next 2 or 3 seasons and ruining all of the flexibility we could have going into next season. So that's kind of the line for me and what I hope. Those are kind of the scenarios that I'm hoping for, but it is not a situation. And maybe you might feel differently, but is there any scenario here where we come out of this more of a contender going into this playoffs?
In my opinion, no, definitely not this season. And I really think, and not to be like overly negative, but I don't think there will be any seismic moves in this coming summer either. I really think
Mm-hmm.
2026's summer might be where you can really try and make a splash. But I do think people should think of this similarly to how it was when Dwayne left. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
have made comparisons to that scenario, and there was the 30 and 11, 11 and 30 season. There was the Dion
Sick.
Waiters, the Hassan Whiteside. There could be some tough years. I mean, we've seen without Jimmy this season, I believe the team is 5-5 or something like that. So I mean, they're about a 500 team, and if Jimmy's gone, regardless of what comes back, it's probably going to be about a 500 team. I don't think anybody that comes back is going to elevate them above, honestly, the Atlantas, Detroits, Indianas. They're going to be in that tier. They're going to be a play-in team, and the East is so bad at the bottom. I think they'll remain in the play-in, but I think there's a good chance they could get bounced out in the play-in. Or, obviously it could be similar to last year where we're playing Boston in the 1-8 matchup, losing in 4 or 5 games. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Tyler has, now an all NBA defender on him constantly because there's not another star on the perimeter. But that, we can
Awesome.
get into kind of the rest of the roster later. But yeah, it's going to be a step back. And I think that's what highlights another struggle within this whole dynamic is the Heat do not like to take steps back. They don't like to tank. They don't, they want to stay competitive constantly. And this is
Mm-hmm.
really going to go against that. There's no way you can trade Jimmy. I mean, there's pie in the sky stuff where it's a 3-team deal, Jimmy to Golden State, and all the assets from Golden State go to Sacramento, Miami gets Fox. I don't think that's realistic right now. And Jimmy expediting this situation with how, he's carried himself in the media, not saying whether it's right or wrong, but he's definitely expedited this trade process. It limits the Heat even more. Some of that stuff might have been available to them at the deadline in February or even in the summer. And I'm not saying they'll take a horrible deal, but things are taken off the table because right now they're, suspending their $50 million superstar 7 games, and they have to go on a West Coast trip.
Now, let me ask you, on that note, as far as how he's impacted the Heat's ability to trade him, I was really surprised that he came out and said, I want to go anywhere besides Miami. How do you think the league looks at that? And do you think anybody takes that at face value as far as teams that probably weren't going to trade for him because they didn't think he'd extend with them? Or do you feel like any teams out there genuinely believe, if they could get the pieces together and trade for him, that he might stick around?
It's tough to say. I think Jimmy, I mean, we're getting some conflicting information throughout this whole process, but I think if Jimmy was getting a max, he'd play almost anywhere. And I think that's because he has so much confidence in himself, which for the past 5 years has made him a great player for Miami because he hasn't been one of these guys that's like, oh, get me more help. He's, he thinks he can carry any roster to the finals. And he's, shown us with some of the more surprising recent finals runs. So I think, yeah, if let's say it's I don't know, Brooklyn or Atlanta or Sacramento, like if he somehow ended up in teams that we think are maybe more in the play-in tier, I think if they're willing to give him a max, he's going to
Mhm.
prioritize that and then kind of turn it to I'll just elevate them myself. So
Yeah,
I think he'll be open to really anywhere, which again that hurts as a Heat fan. It hurts to hear he'd rather be anywhere but here,
that's
and
pretty
but
crazy.
it really is, and I assume it's like he wants to showcase his worth. Basically, he wants to put on display why he should receive a max, and I do think in that post game press conference after the Pacers game, I think that's what some of the comments about the role stuff that he mentioned has to be related to. That he feels like the
Mhm.
Heat are kind of putting him to the side because they know he's not a part of their future. That's just me guessing, but I feel
Mhm.
like he must feel some kind of issue with, oh, you guys are putting me in the corner. People aren't going to see me as a max player. I don't think because that was kind of new information for us. There hadn't been reports that he had an issue with his role prior. I
Yeah.
do think that still must be related to the money. I think this all ultimately comes back to that. And I should have said this at the top. I understand both sides. I understand Jimmy feeling like he deserves a max because he's way outperformed what the Heat could have ever expected him to do. But I also understand why the Heat front office is like, we can't pay a 37-year-old $60 million in 2 years. Like we just won't have any flexibility, and we'll probably have to move off guys just to not be in the second apron. So I'm not trying to make it oversimplified. I understand why both sides have had issues, but my biggest thing is I just wish more of it could have been handled behind closed doors. Either
Mhm.
way, because it's become so just
It's
toxic.
gonna tarnish because there's a scenario where he could have left and come back at retirement when he's on minimums, or we've had this situation with Dwayne Wade where it all worked out in the end. It was a little ugly, but not irreparable. Whereas this is definitely breaching into the irreparable zone.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to circle back to was just that. With that being said, I think this approach was probably very necessary from Jimmy Butler's camp. A lot from what you explained, as far as he has to do this in order to show himself as a max player. Like he needs to go play somewhere where he can convince people, and it's just not going to happen here because we're shifting away from focusing on him in the offense so we can figure things out when he's gone. But at the same time, I wonder if it does make it easier for him to trade, not only because he's opened up his options, which means more people are playing ball. I think if we were going into the trade with the Kings and those kind of conversations, like, look, there's only two other places that want to trade and they don't have pieces as good as ours. So you guys got to cough it up. That puts us in a bit of a bind. Whereas Jimmy has kind of opened the floor a little bit more to where situation. It was very similar to there's a trade a few years ago that happened like that where they were in talks. Oh, Donovan Mitchell to the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell was supposed to be going to the Knicks for like the whole offseason and that whole conversation, but the Knicks were like the one place he wanted to go. And they were, trying to shortchange them, and then Cleveland hopped in, and look at them now; they're having a great
And
time.
I
So,
will have to say, I'm sure a lot, if there are any non-Heat fans listening, I'm sure they're also thinking of the Damian Lillard situation,
mhm,
where it seemed
absolutely,
like, based on whose reporting you believe, it seems like the Heat were kind of trying to extort Portland and being like, listen, he only wants to go to us. He's made that clear. We're kind of giving you a lowball offer. Let's work from there. And I think Portland, never responded to them about anything regarding Dame again. And he ends up in Milwaukee. And if you want to go full macro, that kind of sets off this whole chain of events, really.
yeah,
Because I mean, Jimmy's mentioned how there's been reports at least that Jimmy's camp has been frustrated by Miami not getting him help or whatever the case may be. But again, all that I would remind fans, and I'm saying this to myself too, try and feel about Jimmy and the front office how you felt like 6 or 7 months ago, because as this progresses, that's going to become more and more important. Because as soon as Jimmy's traded, there's going to be all kind of pieces coming from both sides, feeding information from both sides, trying to throw dirt on the other person, basically, right? The front office is going to make Jimmy look like the biggest problem child. They were covering all this stuff for him for all these years. They're going to want to look good to their fans because they just shipped out their franchise player. Same thing for Jimmy going in this new situation, wherever it may be. He's going to want to look good and, basically make Miami look like Minnesota or Chicago or Philly. They're the bad guys. I was trying to do the right thing. They wouldn't, I did so much for them. They wouldn't do anything for me. etc. So do try and be level headed about where we are, because there's a lot of back and forth going on in the media. We've seen that with the Shams versus Pat versus the agent. Like I really never seen anything play out quite like this. It's been really strange. It almost like my sister and my dad are both obsessed with true crime, and I almost feel like this is like a true crime podcast. I'm like, okay, well, the agent said this, but it does go against what he had said previously, so could that mean, it's like we literally feel like we're trying to solve a mystery, and it's because there's so many narratives that different parties are trying to get out there. And it seems like at some points, Jimmy and his camp have not even been completely lined up. We'll see what happens. But if we got an update that Jimmy has parted ways with his agent, I wouldn't be shocked at this point. It seems like everyone involved is unhappy and all the relationships involved are very strained.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'll be glad when this is all over. And
Yeah.
it's sad it's going like this, but I think the blame, it's tough because the way that the internet approaches these things, you're just not allowed to have nuance. Like you really have to decide, do you hate Pat Riley or do you hate Jimmy Butler? Do you think he, is giving up on his team or doing what Jimmy Butler does? Or do you think Pat Riley's been asleep at the wheel for 5 years? The answer is somewhere in between, and it'll be difficult online to kind of get there. But I think for me, I think Pat Riley has failed to do what I think both parties have failed to do what they came together to do. Jimmy Butler came here to win championships for the Miami Heat, and Pat Riley was charged with giving him a team that he could do it with. And both of them got close and made efforts. It's not like we didn't try to get the stars that we wanted. You don't get to just, dump an unlimited amount of money on a player or, trade your whole roster to get Dame Lillard. And like, yeah, we could have shipped some people, but who knows how that really would have worked out and who was really available any of those other times, unless people really wanted us to sign Beal, which I didn't think was the right thing to do. And I get that the Terry Rozier trade is not living up to what people wanted, but the Kyle Lowry trade did work and was what Jimmy wanted. And we got really far with him before he kind of, started his decline. But at the same time, I think Pat Riley has a standard that he's stuck to. He's just not going to pay guys on their last contract. That's something that he didn't do for Shaq. He didn't do for D Wade. He didn't do for LeBron. Didn't really get the chance to do it with LeBron. LeBron's name keeps getting brought up, but LeBron was always going to Cleveland. That wasn't a situation where that was going to be different. And now it's happening with Jimmy. And for what it's worth, he's always been consistent. For better or for worse, if you love him, you hate him. Like this guy is not necessarily, his line of thinking makes sense as his role in protecting the organization and protecting the team. Like we would love to pay Jimmy because we love Jimmy, but that is not going to help the team having a 37-year-old making $60 million a year when we really need other pieces and all the other players in the team are going to start getting more expensive. So it's tough and everybody has a little bit of blame, but I wish we could be leaving this situation with a championship under our belt. We got so close over the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sad that while we had some great runs over the past five, that we don't get to kind of demarcate it with that banner.
Yeah. And it's an exit that's making me feel worse about everyone as a as
Mhm.
a fan or like an analyst,
Yeah.
whichever perspective you want to come from. Jimmy calling out the role stuff to me felt like kind of taking shots at Spo and Hero, which I really didn't like. I understood Jimmy having problems with Pat. I haven't liked how Pat's handled a lot of this stuff, especially publicly. So I totally get that. But then going at Spo and Hero, like, crossed the line for me as a fan. Like, I don't want to see that. I want to, think of all the happy times these guys have had together. I don't want the last thing to be, Jimmy taking subliminal Doc Rivers type shots at these guys, throwing them under the bus. So I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me, and like I said, this is probably the worst everything will feel is what we're in right now. But do you feel, let's say, of all parties involved, who has your opinion changed the most about?
I don't think my opinions really changed much about either of these guys. This has always been a thing that could have happened. Now, With Jimmy, it shifted a little bit because he came in here saying that he loved the Miami Heat organization. He loved the way they did things. He loved how open and transparent they were with their criticism. Like those are specific things that he talked about being excited for and being up for the challenge of, being in an organization with a guy like Pat Riley, who's always been this way. He's always going to, if he has something on his mind and it's time for him to speak, he's going to say it. If he doesn't think you're doing your job well enough, he's going to say those things. That was not Pat Riley singling out Jimmy Butler in some way that he's never done before. Like that is the Pat Riley experience, what we've all signed up for, and what he has decades of experience making work. This team philosophy that we have where we put the team before others, that seemed to be something he was excited about. The ability to carry a very challenging roster to a championship is something he promised us. Like it wasn't just something he was excited about. He said, I'm going to win a ring with this team. Other guys have said it and done it. Other guys have said it and failed. But to get to the end and for it to seem like, he's unhappy with the way things are now, the things aren't really that different than what he was excited to sign up for. And of course, you have the hope that things are going to be better. Um, you at least can't act so surprised that things are happening this way and coming out as so unhappy in this way as if something is starkly different than what it was before, when really the only difference is you're not making $60 million a year, which, if you're going to throw a tantrum about that, I would too. I hate missing out on, tens of millions of dollars. That's not fun. And there's no real acceptable way to, you know, digest that information as a person missing out on that money. But I think that maybe the one thing that's shifted is that I just thought maybe the way he started this season, it felt like he was just going to, understand that this is how it was going to go. And if he needed to go somewhere else to get money, then so be it. But it doesn't seem to be the case. And it does feel a bit ingenuine at times. With Pat, this is always what I knew Pat was going to do. This is exactly who we know Pat to be. So there's just no surprises there. Like,
Yeah.
he's done some great things, but that's just what it is. What about you? Do you feel like I was always concerned about you because when this stuff started happening, I was like, I love Jimmy Butler, but you love Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
You're wearing a
Yeah.
Marquette t-shirt right now.
I am.
For anybody who's just listening on Spotify.
That's for three Heat legends, by the way: Dwayne Wade, Jimmy Butler, and of course Jay Crowder.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's really tough, man. Like you said, I love Jimmy. I don't wear like almost any other NBA merch other than the Heat, and I had a Jimmy Butler Timberwolves shirt because he was like my favorite non-Heat player. So getting him was amazing. He's my second favorite basketball player ever after Jimmy Butler. I mean, after Dwayne Wade is Jimmy Butler's second. So yeah, it's really tough. I don't think that much less of Jimmy. You know, I get it. Like he wants out. He feels kind of trapped in this situation. And yeah, it's tough. I guess if I had to say, I think like maybe slightly less of him just because I had hoped those blowups with Minnesota, Chicago, Philly were more related to those franchises that we know to be pretty dysfunctional. And I thought with the Heat, it was different. It really has not turned out to be that different. It worked better and longer with the Heat, but it still is ending the same way. And like you said, I think if he had his max contract extension, other than missing games, I think he'd be, doing exactly what the Heat want him to do. I think he'd be playing hard, smiling, showing up to work every day. And so I get that. And I think I am a little more concerned about the front office than I have been in a while. And it's tough because, like you were saying, online, it's just, oh, Pat Riley, sleepy Pat, like sleep at the wheel, get him out of the front office. But, everything that goes on in the front office is going to be involving everyone. And Pat is, happy to take on that kind of leadership role, to take all the, venom that might come from the fan base when things like this happen. But there's a lot of people involved, including Spo, who I feel like is, I won't say universally loved, but loved by the majority of the fan base. And it's just tough. I guess if I was going to outline it, I would say the 2021 summer, I believe if I'm thinking of this correctly, was the summer where they acquired PJ Tucker and Kyle Lowry. Great signings. They were the 1 seed the following year, made the conference finals. They lose in 7 to Boston. I struggle to find something outside of like the scouting department and drafts, which that's important, but it is something I don't give Pat as much credit for. That the team you could really point to is like, oh, this was a great move by them, especially in terms of bringing in talent. And in that time frame, we had the Lillard fiasco, and there's different reporting on, did Miami ever even have a chance to make an offer? Did they lowball, like some people have said? It's very hard to know what exactly happened, but for whatever reason, a superstar asked to go to the Heat and the Heat only, and they couldn't get it done. And that doesn't mean it's an automatic, but that's surprising to me. And now you're losing another franchise player unceremoniously. It's in a very toxic manner, similarly to how things ended with Dwayne, LeBron, Shaq, even Bosch. It was a different thing. It was discussions about his medical issues, but it's still, they had to repair all those relationships, and I hope ultimately they're able to repair their relationship with Jimmy. But to sum all that up, I am just a little more uneasy with how the front office is conducting business. And they parlay this into a De'Aaron Fox trade, I'll put on my Pat Riley shirt. It'll be great. But it's just the longer we go without something I can feel really good about, I'll be worried. And speaking of that, I don't want to get into the fake trade machine too much, but while we're here, you get the Shams notification. Jimmy Butler has been traded to Team X for this. What and I would caution Heat fans, don't expect a lot, but what is like a return you'd be like, okay, I feel like the front office handled this as good as they could have given the circumstance.
Let's see. The main things I was focusing on through most of this process, we've only had like a day where the whole league was open to us as far as trade destinations. The 29 other teams that Jimmy Butler decided he'd be happier with. So most of my focus had been on places like Sacramento, Golden State, and Houston. And so trades where I'd feel really good about how the front office, saved our season and our organization for the next few years. Obviously, the De'Aaron Fox trade would be number one. Like if we can get that guy in the door, De'Aaron and Tyler together, anchored by Bam, would just be a really special thing to witness. If we had just one more really really good player, I felt like we could kind of contend with Cleveland a little bit in play style, but we're lacking a little bit of the defensive stalwartness over there. But that would be exciting and interesting, at least.
Yeah, to
With
me, that's tier one home
Yeah,
run out of the
easy.
park. Pipe dream, probably, but that would be beautiful. Jimmy
Yeah,
turns into another all star caliber guy, is like
yeah,
the best case scenario. What's next
absolutely.
for you?
After that would have to be the Warriors. I would love just a mix, like a hodgepodge package there as far as picks, and Andrew Wiggins or somebody on an expiring from over there that we could kind of open up the cap space, get some resources and draft capital, and kind of just move on. That would be nice. I like Andrew Wiggins. I think he could he'd really improve our team from a defensive standpoint at the very least, and at least be able to provide some at least offensive effort and hustle on that side. But on the flip side of that, as I've been thinking today, another guy I'd be super excited about is if we, called Atlanta and saw what we could get from over there, whether that be a Dyson Daniels or a Jalen Johnson or even a Trae Young. I would be very interested in seeing Trae Young and Tyler Hero play basketball together. That would
So
maybe
so,
not be
so
great
would
basketball,
so
but
would opposing offenses. They would be really excited to see them playing together.
hey, we're not doing great from the front court anyways. Why not have, hey, we can just shoot it out with everybody and see what happens. But that would be fun. Trae Young with Khalil Ware would be very, very fun. I think he would really maximize what we got out of our rookie. And at that point, at least I knew they weren't kind of like leading in fear and trying to take the safe route. Like that's a star right there that would probably be happy to play in Miami. Outside of that, I think Houston young guy plus an expiring contract. I'm good to go there. You can get me Tari Eason, Amin Thompson, and we take on like Fred VanVleet for a year.
If we
Cool.
get a Min Thompson, I'll get a Pat Riley tattoo.
It's like
Okay. I want to throw some specifics at you because, and again, we're getting very into the like transaction talk weeds of this. We won't do this every episode, but obviously, this is the biggest story in the NBA right now, and it's about the team. we love and are going to be covering. So the Warriors thing, I feel like the
Hmm.
Warriors is probably the most realistic outcome because they're a win now team. Seems desperate for a splashy move. They tried to get Markin and they tried to get Paul George. Paul George and Jimmy Butler compared their whole careers. That's if you're interested in Paul George, you're probably interested in Jimmy Butler. So the return from the Warriors, I think Kaminga is maybe you could say the prize you'd want from them, right? And
Hmm.
there's varying opinions on Kaminga, and he'll have to get paid this summer, which is tough too. It's not like he's already on some kind of affordable deal, and money is what this all comes back to. So if you're trading Jimmy because you won't give him a max extension, but then you have to give Kaminga a rookie max, you still probably don't feel great about where you are, and then you're also having to pay Wiggins, who has multiple years left on his deal. So my long-winded question is: Wiggins has to be in it for salary. Would you
Hmm.
rather have like a first in Pajimski or just Kaminga coming with Wiggins?
I think I'm not a big Kaminga guy. And I really don't want to pay him either. Now, if it was a different scenario, he was on a good deal, that's like, yeah, let's see what happens. But if we're trying to save money for a guy we really believe in, I just can't see the Heat really believing in Jonathan Kaminga. Like that doesn't add up. And that would be a move where I'm like, okay, we gotta get Pat out of here. He's he might be cooked, I fear.
Yeah,
Um I like Pajimski though. I think that's a affordable guy who's honestly played very much like a Heat player as far as playing above his station
he
for a team that's
does.
needed him to. And then
Similarly to Jaime, has had a really rough year this year, but promising
yeah,
rookie year. We can
if
focus on that.
they both come out of their sophomore slump, that could be very special. Or if they fuse together into some amazing player, that would also be very, very awesome. We have not considered the options of if we can actually figure out the fusion dance for our organization and which players we could put together. But
It could
those two
change
would
the
be
game.
that would be game changing. Pat Riley, if you can figure out the fusion dance, I will literally send you my paycheck every week for the rest of my life. You can have it. You don't need it, but you can have it. But
Okay,
yeah.
I got another hypothetical for you. Houston, like let's say the market dries up. There's just not a lot out there. Houston has Fred Van Fleet's contract, which is like 42 million or something. So it's almost
Hmm.
as much as Jimmy makes. And it has a team option for next year. So it's fully in the Heat's court. They could just decline it and then they opened up the same amount of space they did for Jimmy. If the market's dried up and Houston's like, we can give you Fred and like really nothing else, like not Reed, not
Dude,
Tar.
give me Cam Whitmore. I hit yes right now.
Cam Whitmore, I agree, but let's say it's just Fred and Steven Adams or whatever the thing is. But would you rather have? Because this is basically the question: would you rather have Fred, who's like a vet who will help, more than Jimmy, who you I think would basically have to have away from the team the rest of the season? What scenario would you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, if we really can't find anything that opens up space and gives us some draft capital or a player we really love, I might as well just bring Fred Van Vliet in here and see what he can do. He can hoop. We've got a guard position that is not being fulfilled by anything meaningful right now. Tyler needs a guy he can play beside, and Fred does pretty well on the court, and helps make his teammates a little bit better sometimes. So that's not the worst thing, and it at least finishes out the season in an interesting way. And then I guess we can have conversations with him about a future contract, or
Right? Yeah.
maybe
Decline
he'll
the
take off and go somewhere else.
Yeah, decline the team option and get
Mm.
something on a
I
smaller
like Fred.
scale.
I don't like Fred on Houston. Like, I thought that was always a weird thing, and we've talked about that in our previous show.
Yeah.
But Fred in a vacuum, really great basketball player, and on an expiring deal, if we can convince him to take less money to make something happen here, great. If not, then we were getting rid of this money anyways. And thanks for helping us hold the season
And it
together.
puts Jimmy in a good spot. I think Houston will pay him. He'll be surrounded with good young guys, some
Yeah.
organization on the way up. So and I think that's important. Like I want Jimmy to succeed, especially if Jimmy goes to the West. I'll hope that
Mhm.
team wins the title, obviously assuming Miami won't be able to at that point. So, I think that'd be I guess kind of like the best bad case scenario where like you're not really
Mhm.
getting any assets back, but you're freeing up the same amount of money and getting the guy out of the building, which is causing a lot of issues for people, and also getting them to a decent spot. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the actual team on the court and what they have coming up. Did you have any closing thoughts on the Jimmy Butler discussion, or anything you want to kind of just address about it in general?
I think you mentioned it there at the end, actually, that, with all that being said and everything that's happening, I want Jimmy to go somewhere and I want him to have a ring at the end of it all. Like, if he can go somewhere and be competitive, if we can get him somewhere that, he can win a title with in the next couple years, I'd be happy as a fan of him specifically. It's very, very sad that it's not happening for our team, but I'm just very, very thankful for two finals runs, several conference championships, several conference runs, like, or conference finals runs. Like, that is a special 5 years. Like, we did not have a 5 years where we suffered. I was there for the 41 and 41 season, the 30 and 10 or whatever. Like, that sucked. I cut my teeth on that season and I don't want to return back to that. And I'm thankful that Jimmy showed up and put an end to the mediocrity that we were going through over the past 3 years before he was there. And so, yeah, I'm thankful for him. I want him to do really well. Like, this doesn't really sour my desire for him to have a Hall of Fame type career, but it's just sad that it's not happening here.
Yeah, totally agree. I echo all those sentiments. I want 22 in the rafters one day. I hope the relationship is able to be repaired to that degree. I think Heat fans, I hope, I mean, I will definitely, will be more in the camp as we're talking about past Jimmy teams. I think they'll be more along the lines of Philly, where they're like, God, wish we still had you. It was amazing, compared to Minnesota and Chicago, where it's like,
Mm,
oh, this guy, he's a whatever, all these bad names. They boo him when they come back. Minnesota, especially. I don't know if Chicago
yeah.
actually boos him, but I think, I hope Heat fans will revere Jimmy for what he did for us. Everything he did in this 5 year span has way exceeded my expectations. We basically traded Josh Richardson and a first for this guy, and he's been, in my opinion, the third best player in franchise history behind Dwayne and LeBron. So yeah, not, it's like I keep saying, this is the worst it's going to feel right now, but always love for Jimmy and love for Pat, love for Spo. Those are the architects of this whole, organization that we're fans of. So there's, you don't have to hate someone in this. There doesn't have to be a bad guy. That, there's both sides that are maybe not handling things perfectly, but it's a tough situation with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line. So you can understand why people get upset. We're not going to go much longer here, but I did want to talk a little basketball, and especially some positive things, because this has been a sad show. So the Heat so far this season, they're 17 and 15. They're 11th in net rating, which honestly, for everything going on, I feel like is pretty solid. Ninth in offense, 12th in defense. The last 2 weeks, they're 18th in net. We'll try and give you kind of those updates, like how they've been recently. They have been 18th in net rating overall recently, 18th in offense, and 15th in defense. So tough little stretch recently. But Lino, overall, what have been some bright spots on the court for you this season?
I cannot express enough how exciting it has been to watch Tyler Hero do what he's done this season. He has somehow managed to put it all together on the offensive side of the ball from a scoring standpoint. But even, moving the ball around, he has some incredible statistics this season that are really on an all-star level, and some might even say an all-NBA level. I think that everybody who's been holding on to their Tyler Hero stock, especially Pat Riley, is very excited to see that this has finally come to fruition. He is shooting at a generational level from all over the court right now. And it's just been awesome to see that it's all kind of like an evolution of what he's been working on, and not like a thing where he really had to change the way he played basketball. Like, he just managed to master the things he's been trying to do over the past 6 or 7 years. And so that's just been awesome to watch happen. And I do think and I think the defense has also been, I think he knows what he needs to do and he tries to do it. It's just he's not a very effective defender. You can't just kind of will yourself into being one sometimes. And so I was very impressed with him. He's definitely the number one highlight of this season. And I drafted him in my fantasy basketball league this year. So that's been awesome to watch week to week.
Yeah, you can't say enough about what Tyler's doing. And like you said, it's not like he's changed anything drastically, but as it's been noted by a lot of people, he cut out mid-range shots, which seemed to be a specific request of the coaching staff. and then has just become hyper efficient basically everywhere. His playmaking has definitely gone up a level this year. His finishing at the basket, which has been a weakness for him, is a lot stronger. He's getting to the free throw line a little bit more. He's always been a good rebounder. That's still there. So, yeah, could not be more impressed with Tyler and really hope he makes the All-Star game. We'll probably talk about that in a future episode, but I think he's got a real chance to be, I think I saw someone say that would be Miami's 11th All-Star and maybe just the third that they drafted. So it'd be really cool for Tyler to be able to do that. Um, Other highlights, uh,
I
it's,
think
go
most
ahead.
recently it's been nice. I think Jovic is figuring it out. I think
Yes.
him as a starter was rough to start the season,
Yeah.
but I do appreciate what he brings to the table every night, the effort he puts forth, the energy, some of the chaos that comes from him is, it helps us a lot of the times. Like it switches things up. There's a change of pace. He always brings really great energy and effort. His size is very important. And when we play him next to Khalil Ware, it's kind of special. And you can kind of see glimpses of like, okay, if both of these guys can really figure it out, then this could be something very, very special as a front court. So there's inklings there. It's not enough to get excited about being almost a 500 team, but there's a vision there that I can see from Spo and then I can see from that particular pairing, especially combined with Tyler Hero. And I think that will be very interesting to watch the rest of the season, as I'm sure we're going to see it a lot more moving
Yes.
forward.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to remind Heat fans of. And this, again, is a Heat specific podcast. So you love this team if you're listening to the show, or you love one of us. So we appreciate you either way. But you love this team. So cherish the small things. Like if you look through my Twitter, I have threads of Justice Winslow clips. It didn't work out. But man, when he would have a good game, that game at Milwaukee, Jimmy's first year when he
Oh,
was out, oh my God. I was there in person. It was one of my favorite games ever. So cherish the little things. We're not saying, oh, Khalil Ware could become an all NBA player. He could transform this franchise. But if you get a rotation player there, that's great. And he looks exciting. He does fun stuff. So I'm not trying to sound like, the crypt keeper being like, no, your coffin's gonna be really comfortable. But it's find joy in the little things because we're about to take a step back. That's almost assuredly happening. Also, I should note we will probably both refer to the team as we. We are just those kinds of fans. um, but it's going to be a step back. But that doesn't mean there can't be fun fruit to be had from this journey. So keep all those things in mind. And I do want to shout out Bam. It has been a really rough offensive season for him, and I think that has given some people ammunition to attack him, say he's not a max player, da 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 da. Bam is struggling offensively. We have a large sample size that he's a much better offensive player than this. I think, we'll have whole episodes on Bam, I'm sure. But I do think things will get better. I think all of these struggles will go into him being the best version of himself. And he's still a top 5 defender on the planet, still a great screen setter, passer, rebounder. So he's still doing a ton of things to help this team out. So still pro Bam over here for sure. Lino, to close it out, Jimmy, like we said, has been suspended 7 games. We'll probably talk to you guys again late next week. So I'm guessing we're going to miss the next 5 games ish. And I want to get your thoughts on them, Lino. So for the people listening that might not have the schedule in front of them, coming up tomorrow, Saturday the 4th, we play Utah at 7:00. Again, said we. Whoops. Then the team is going to at Sacramento. It's a West Coast road trip. So at Sacramento, at Golden State, at Utah, at Portland. So winnable games, maybe not without your best player, obviously, but winnable. So in those 5 games, what's your general vibe? What are you going to be looking for? And if you want to, do you have kind of a record prediction for how the team will do in that stretch?
yeah, I mean it's very nice that at least going into this stretch without Jimmy, we're facing what 4 teams in the bottom 10 in net rating, and I think one of those teams is like on the 14th, and so it's nice that these teams are struggling, and maybe we can under struggle them for the next week or so. But mostly, I'll be excited to, I think, Spo is definitely going to continue to explore that Khalil Ware, Jovic lineup. And, what they were able to do, that lineup that they had, I can't remember exactly who all was there when they started to try to mount that comeback in the game last night. That was exciting to watch, and I hope to see a
Johnson.
lot more of that. Hopefully, yeah, Johnson gets to play a little bit more there. The Sacramento and Golden State games are going to be very important because we need our guys to ball out so that Sacramento and Golden State feel the need to trade for Jimmy even more. So that is what I'm going to be looking for there. As far as record predictions, I'm going to go, what is this, 5 games? I think we're going to go 3-2.
Yeah, agreed. The Sacramento Golden State is a back to back. The most Heat thing to do would be to like lose to one of these bad teams and then like win on the second night of a back to back at Golden State or something. But yeah, I also agree. Some way they're going to end up 3-2. And Utah, Portland, those teams have been over like 20th to 30th in net rating most of the season. Those are winnable games even without Jimmy. But as we've seen, this Heat team, really all Heat teams, it feels like, will play to the level of their competition. And it's going to be interesting to see how this roster reacts to all of this drama. Honestly, are they going to be extra locked in? Will it be easier to focus with Jimmy out of there? Are they going to be distracted? They're going to be being asked 100 questions about Jimmy and this whole situation. So I am curious to see how the team performs and hope they're able to focus on the court. And again, hope we get to see some looks at some of these younger guys. Khalil has been playing really well with Jovic. I've been pretty anti Khalil and Bam lineup guy. I don't really see the appeal in that, but at this point, whatever. Jimmy's
Give it
gone.
up.
Might as well try it. What do we have to lose? A game? We're gonna lose a bunch of those. Trot it out there. So let's see what happens.
We should. I just want to see it. Just give us a glimpse.
Yeah,
What have they shared the court for like 5 seconds so far this season?
yeah. It was like just for like a free throw rebound at the end of a game or something. So yeah, I throw him out there. Whatever. Alec Burks has been shooting really well. I appreciate his readiness as a veteran. But you know what? You can get him out of the rotation, man. We need to get Pell Larson and Kashad Johnson out there. Like, I know Spo won't do that. Spo's going to try and win every game because he's a great coach. But yeah, don't be afraid to focus on the future because that's what we need to focus
There are
on to be
2
excited
guys who are going to
about.
be very obsessed with any rookie that you put in. So if
Yes,
there's any fans that you want to placate towards Spo, feel free because we would much rather lose watching the rookies than lose watching some journeymen.
yeah. We didn't mention Terry Rozier. It's been rough. I think the only thing to say is Yopi plays better. You can't like attach a pick to him to get off that contract or anything. Like you just have to hope it gets better. I guess you could maybe include him in the Jimmy trade if you're like trying to max out value or something. But yeah, hope Terry plays better. Also, this is kind of happening as we're recording. I don't think it really matters, but the players association, the players union, is filing a grievance with the league, with the Miami Heat, about the Jimmy Butler suspension. These things don't usually happen enough to actually have the suspension lifted. It'll essentially, if I understand this correctly, just get some of Jimmy's salary paid for these games. If Jimmy misses all 7 games and isn't paid, he'll lose out. I think it's around $4 million. So big deal, obviously. So they might be able to get some of that back for him. I don't think it'll result in him actually playing these games, but if you get the Shams notification, the union's filing a grievance against the Heat, it's not a big deal. It's kind of standard protocol. They have to do that stuff. That's what unions are for. So hopefully they can get Jimmy some of his money. I don't really
Shout out
see
to the
the
union.
yeah. Shout out to unions. This is a pro union show, if anybody was wondering. So yeah, but thank you guys for tuning in. This is the first episode of Heat of the Moment. Shout out to Lino. I'm so excited to be doing this with a great friend. Shout out to my wife, Ashley. She made the cover art for this. Shout out to Kalen. He was the one that convinced us to start a podcast, really. He had to kind of beg both of us to do Irrational Confidence, and now we're doing our own. So shout out to Kalen. Shout out for anybody listening, especially our folks from Dallas and Weewaw. We love and appreciate you all. And, there's going to be some tough moments. We're probably at the toughest moment right now, but there will be some fun and exciting moments too. And we're excited to cover all of them with you guys. We're planning on posting every week. And, we're just excited. Lino, do you have any closing thoughts for the people?
I think we're going to have a good time. And if you guys have any questions for us, I think that will help us, as we will just talk in circles about the Heat all season long if nobody asks us anything specific. So looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Yeah, definitely. Check us out. We're on Twitter at Heat of the NBA. We're also on Bluesky if you prefer a slightly less toxic social media platform. That's also at Heat of the NBA. We're on Instagram, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you'd like to listen to it on another podcast platform, we're probably there as well. Like, comment, subscribe, leave reviews, and ultimately, we want to hear from you because we love talking hoops with people, and we want to find other Heat fans to suffer through moments like these with, and then, have moments of joy with as well. So again, for myself, Micah, my good friend Lino, thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time.